Okay, good morning to everybody who's joined us for this special business support session that we've decided to host in the Downtown Den on the back really of many enquiries that we've been getting here at Downtown in Business over a range of issues from those companies who are facing real challenges and difficulties moving forward, who perhaps have to consider insolvency as the ultimate price to pay for the challenges that we've been facing in recent months. HR issues, of course, we've had a whole array of changes in legislation that have gone from everything from furlough at 67% through to 80%, whether your team should be working from home, working in the office, or like mine, not working at all. And then, of course, but I'm only joking, my team are listening to this today. They've done a sterling job over the past 6 or 7 months. And then, of course, our high streets have been particularly hard hit, and we're delighted that we've got somebody who I think will have some positive things to say about what we plan to do in Liverpool, at least as far as Christmas is concerned, which I think, given the reports this morning, Boris has decided can go ahead, which is very good of him, isn't it? Because I'm sure we'd have all locked down at Christmas and behaved ourselves. Anyway, with us this morning, Keith Tully from Begbies Traynor, Victoria Brown from Performance Consultancy, Bill Addy, of course, is the Chief Executive of the Liverpool BID Company. Good morning to you all.
Good morning, Frank. Great to be here this morning. Good morning to all those watching.
And let's start off, Keith, with your take on what's happening out there in the economy, because one of the great things that Begbies do is regular surveys, and you really have got your finger on the pulse of how businesses are performing, and the both those that are doing well, but more importantly, in terms of this morning's conversation, perhaps those are struggling somewhat. So what's the temperature of business at this moment in time? Confidence, and where we're heading perhaps into 2021.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, obviously, Frank, we've had quite a few discussions in the Downtown Den over the last 7 or 8 months or so. And, it started off where people were concerned about, staff and concerned about their own livelihoods. It got to a point where people were looking at their business and how the business would react to a prolonged period of time without trade. And I kind of got a feeling that we were getting to the point where businesses felt that we were coming out of lockdown before we went into tier 3 in Liverpool. There was a real feeling that businesses were going to start trading again. You saw the footfall outside in streets, people were on trains, and people were obviously taking the correct measures. But I had a real feel that people wanted to get back out and to work again, and business was being affected because of that, and from a positive point of view. But then obviously when we went into the tier 3 lockdown, and obviously now the second lockdown, the national lockdown that we're now in, it's knocked us back again. And I just think that businesses really all want to be in a position where we're able to operate. And, we're hoping that the vaccine will be coming out, in January sort of time, which I think will give people the confidence. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I think if the older generation get the vaccine within a short period of time, it will allow people who were previously probably concerned about their relatives and their family, to not want to be out and to be putting themselves in a position where they could maybe pick up the virus, to want to get out and to work. So I think the positives are there after Christmas, after we've gone through the festive season, hopefully with our families, we can see some sort of a change in the possibility of a large amount of people being receiving the vaccine, and then business can start to kick on again. And I think once that happens, I think we're very resilient, aren't we? Especially as a city. You've seen what's gone on during this period of time. People on this call have been very prominent in making things positive for the region. And I think that, if we're able to get past, say, January, February time and start working again, I think businesses will benefit from that.
But unfortunately, Keith, and you've sort of touched upon this, a lot of businesses had started to see some light at the end of the tunnel around September time. And then we went into the second lockdown. And although the national lockdown is been 3 or 4 weeks now, I think some businesses in Liverpool, once tier 3 hit, felt as though they may as well have been locked down. And so on that basis, many of those companies have hit hard times. And I'm sure we'll be looking for some advice as to what happens if the unthinkable becomes a reality. What are the sort of things that people, as company directors, business owners, can start to think about in terms of options?
Yeah, a lot of the concerns that I've received are from people who are looking at their bank account, seeing that they've got some form of a facility there, you know, a bounce back loan, receivables, and looking at the way forward for them as a business, seeing what they do, what it means to the business, a new world, and how they will be treated by their customers moving forward, what the position is with their landlord. And once they're able to assess where they are as a business, then they can start to plan what they use the money that they've got in the business for. And I think that we're seeing there's a hell of a lot of businesses who were struggling before the pandemic, who really needed to do something and seek advice before all of this happened, who through no fault of their own have been forced further along the road. And they really need to be getting the right advice now so that they can plan for the future to see whether their business is viable and whether or not they need to look at a formal process to deal with the issues that they maybe had beforehand.
In terms of what that might look like, Keith, I'm aware that there are a range of different routes that companies in that situation can take, aren't there? So we hear about businesses going into liquidation. We hear about all sorts of different phrases thrown about Phoenix companies, for example. You know, is it ultimately a case of being able to sit down with people like yourself so that they can navigate through those options? It's not simply a case, is it, of saying, oh, right, we've run out of cash, we've got to close the doors. At Begbies, you've actually got potentially plans that can get those companies up and running again.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you say, we are an advisory firm. The initial thought process when we speak to any company director is to rescue, to save the business, to look at a way of maintaining that business, the employment that it gives to the area. So as you quite rightly said, there's lots of different processes that a business, a company director can look at if they're in some form of financial difficulty. And it's a bit like, you know, you look at whether or not the company is viable to start with, whether or not the company can carry on trading in its current guise. You know, you mentioned words like liquidation. You know, there's obviously company voluntary arrangements which can be looked at by directors, which enable them to basically to breathe, to get a bit of time to look at where their business is at and to repay people over a period of time that's viable to them as business owners. You know, there's other processes like administration that business owners can look at if it's viable for them. But really, it's quite the technical side of it is when they come and sit or they speak to us in person, and we can run through all of those options. And it's a tailor-made service really to that business, to the position that business is in. But the initial thought process is always, how do we save this business? You know, how do we prevent an insolvency process? And I'd say probably 7 out of 10 business owners who come to see me, most, you know, 7 of them will go away and not need an actual insolvency process. We can just tweak the business a bit and look at some form of a restructuring within the business that doesn't actually need a formal process like a liquidation.
And this may sound obvious, Keith, but I know from your experience, conversations we've had, it's not necessarily the case. The sooner a business comes and has that conversation, the better, isn't it? You know, you've told me in the past where companies have come to you when it perhaps has been too late. Had they made that approach 6 months earlier, you'd have probably been able to come up with a solution for them. So if there are companies out there who are thinking things are a bit tight, not as in the place where we anticipated we would be, even taking account of lockdown, now's the time to call, isn't it? Don't wait until you're facing throwing the keys back at the landlord and walking away from it all.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's been some real horror stories before the pandemic where people have used their own personal finances to put money into businesses without seeking the advice beforehand. And that's basically been a waste of money for them. They've lost equity in houses that they've paid over to individual creditors when the company owed other people as well. And they've been in the same position, but with a larger mortgage at the end of the day. So I would always say, always come to speak to a professional advisor. It'll always be free of charge advice. They'll tell you where you stand. And from that, then at least you're in a position that you can make a real decision based on, the correct advice.
Okay, thanks, Keith. We'll no doubt talk to you again a bit later on as the conversation continues. But Victoria Brown, Vic, is the Managing Director of High Performance Consultancy, HR consultancy company, based in Liverpool, but operating across the country. And I know you've been particularly busy with a whole raft of issues that have emerged, of course, during the past 6-7 months or so. And it's the inconsistency that is really making business owners struggle. The last thing that an entrepreneur wants to be looking at is the detail of employment law. And it seems to me that the government have chopped and changed what their guidance is during the last few months. Difficult to keep up with it. So let's start with this thorny issue of working from home, or as I put it now, working from work. If you are minded to have your team in the office, what's stopping you from doing that, Vic?
So, as you say, we have chopped and changed several times in this regard now, and it's been really tough for organisations. You've gone from sort of us all working from home during the lockdown to us sort of being able to feel confident to bring people back to the workplace, and significant money was spent by many organisations to make their place of work COVID secure. And then Boris Johnson announces again, if you can work from home, then do so. And that again left this sort of, I think we're used to it now, this grey question mark around what the government's guidance is. Lots of phone calls coming through, what can we do? And the consensus has been for most organisations, if they have made, and I do caveat that in terms of it has to be safe, and you have to have ensured that you've updated your health and safety, your risk assessments. You need to make sure that you've done everything that needs to be done to consider to be COVID safe, COVID secure. Then many organisations have left it voluntary. The reason that they've done so, I think, is because of the concern for people, because whilst we've got obviously the pandemic and the concern around the virus, we've also got mental health, and that is, as it should rightly be, in the spotlight right now. Some concerns around people that maybe are on their own or vulnerable, that are isolated, and the challenges that creates. So our advice to clients has been, if you've got if you leave it voluntary and you've got people within your organisation that actually cannot work from home, and whether that be because of the environment that they're in, personally, I've got some people in my organisation that they've been living and working in the same room, which has not been great for them. During the first lockdown, we didn't have much of an option, but now we have. We've left it voluntary within our business, and those people have decided to come into work, and for whatever other personal reasons that they may have, then they have been given the option to come into work. And I think I chair a HR directors group across the UK, and that's been across all different size businesses. The general sort of rule of thumb that most organisations are now looking at is if they're leaving, sort of skeleton staff are allowed back into the office, because they are considering those other challenges that people may face.
It's never ceases to amaze me when I go onto my social media platforms now to see all those people who had mental health as the #1 priority and issue in 2019, now telling everyone they should be staying at home and locking down. Doesn't appear to be any sense of the mental health impact that this thing is having on many of the people who work for companies right across the country, Liverpool included. And when we talk about HR services and provision, obviously the default is to think about employment law. But again, I know HPC do an awful lot around this mindfulness about well-being in the workplace, and mental health is being flagged up, isn't it, increasingly as a big problem, a big challenge that we're all going to have to deal with in the new year.
Yeah, I think, you know, to your point there, Frank, it's always a problem, and we all have mental health, and I think many organisations have been incredibly proactive, as you say, in sort of other years. This is a general concern I've got around a couple of areas in HR at the moment. I feel that many businesses are trying to survive, and I understand that. You know, we're all in the same position. I think in March, when this really hit home of the devastating impact that it's going to have on our economy, there's been this concern, right, we need to survive, and we'll do that whatever way we can. And there's been a complete disregard for other things, such as, you know, people's mental health, communication, redundancy. I've been shocked the way in which some people have made redundancies. You know, normally that's sort of well thought out, well considered, not only for the people that are being made redundant, but also for the people that remain. That hasn't happened. We set up a people hub. Welcome, anyone is welcome to attend. It's for like HR community, anybody that's sort of involved in managing people within their organisation. And one of the main reasons we did that was not just to give people an employment law update, but to remind them about the importance of managing their people. You know, we had one recently talking about appraisals. You know, people have forgotten to do that. You know, it seems to have, at the end of the day, you've got people within your organisation. Most of the time, it's your most expensive resource, and it's being forgotten right now. And you may have, I've had a couple of clients with the wrong attitude, where they've said, oh, well, it doesn't matter because they can't go anywhere else. You know, unemployment is through the roof right now. Where are they going to go? And that's really dangerous, because what you don't want is, yes, they may not be able to move on, so your retention may stay quite high, but they're disengaged employees, and that can be very dangerous within an organisation. That can create, you know, low productivity, toxicity in an organisation. So, you know, I think it's probably, you know, I think mental health absolutely is one of those big concerns, but as is probably a lot of other areas of HR right now.
And final point, Victoria, we will obviously come back to you during the course of the conversation, but I just wanted to ask you about the furlough situation. And again, aware that some businesses have been all over the place with this. First point to make is that it has changed now. We're back on the 80% level, as I understand it. But we do need to pay, as employers, national insurance and pension contributions. That's right, isn't it? That's my understanding of the legislation anyway.
Well done, Frank. Yeah, I mean, we've gone full circle with this, haven't we? We had furlough originally, which was, you know, fantastic, supported many businesses, and as we know, it sort of dropped from 80% down gradually to sort of ease us off furlough. And then they introduced the job support scheme, and I don't know if anyone else feels on the call today, but I'm a HR professional and it confused the life out of me. So, you know, I remember sitting in a room with my colleagues saying, why on earth are we making this so difficult? Why don't we just keep the furlough scheme, albeit reduce it down if needs be? And lo and behold, clearly we had a similar conversation within the government, because that's what we've done. I mean, what is good about obviously the furlough scheme being you know, maintained now is that obviously we are back at 80%. You know, you do have to make those NI and pension contributions. You have got that ability to have flexible furlough as well, which is something that you'll know from previous times when I've spoken on behalf of Downtown. I feel that should have been introduced earlier. So you've still got that flexibility. One thing I would note is a change recently is from the 1st of December, you can't include notice periods within furlough. So what people used to be able to do is, obviously, if they were making redundancies or exiting someone out of the business, they could still furlough them up until their end date. Can't do that anymore. So just bear that in mind. If you are going to do that from the 1st of December, you do need to pay the notice period separately.
Okay. And just one final point on furlough, because again, I think it may have been Keith on a previous call who'd raised this. Somewhat surprised me, but worth mentioning, I think. When you get furlough money, you've got to pay that on to your staff. It's not for a company to pocket that and utilise it as they see fit. And there are some pretty significant penalties, I think I'm right in saying, if you don't pass the furlough money onto the people it's intended for.
Absolutely. It was quite shocking last time when Keith was telling us those stories, and I've heard a few of my own now, fortunately not of my clients, but certainly some unscrupulous employers out there. And that, you know, the government are encouraging for employees to contact, you know, and if they do feel that somebody is not has been misusing the furlough scheme, they need to contact HMRC. We know that this money has got to be paid back in future years to come, and I couldn't stress this more to my clients to ensure that they document their furlough, that they follow the rules to furlough. And we've got to hold this information for 5 years. It needs to be somewhere. You need to make sure you've had the letters. There should be letters this time round in furlough, even a side letter. Even if you continue with furlough, we still need to notify your employers of that. I know, because they will be, once this is all over, they are going to come and look, you know, and make sure that we have actually adhered to the legislation.
Thanks, Vic. As I say, I'm sure we'll come back to you a little later on. It's good that Paul Stanley's joined us now. He's not an imposter who's just popped up on the screen late.
Yeah, all right, Frank.
Keith's colleague at Begbies, but with some very practical experiences that he's going to share with us in a moment or two. But before that, I'll bring Bill into the conversation. Bill Addy, as I said earlier, Chief Executive of the Liverpool BID Company, been tremendously involved in many great initiatives in the city in recent months to try and keep that part of, let's face it, the business world that's faced the biggest challenges, that's retail and hospitality. Bill, thanks for joining us this morning.
Delighted to be part of it again, Frank. Thanks.
Yeah. And tell us about some of those great initiatives, Bill, and whether or not we can continue any of them or how we're going to continue. So let's start with that positive of positives, get a bit upbeat in this conversation. We've been talking about a lot of the challenges. But Liverpool Without Walls, which was a fabulous project, and I know you're looking to continue it and perhaps roll it out to other parts of the city as well.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Yeah, as you said, Liverpool Without Walls was an incredible, very fast response that we got from our city council together with the BID Company and the Chamber of Commerce supporting, but very quick response to reopening in the summer and to try and maximise the Eat Out to Help Out scheme as well. And perhaps we'll pick up on that because we've got another continuation of that we'd like to talk about. Liverpool Without Walls enabled our restaurants in the city to generate an additional 3,000 covers. And we know the difference that made. Our footfall figures show that clearly. Our businesses were able to get more people out dining, more people enjoying themselves. And it's been a great benefit to the restaurant culture in the city centre. What we're trying to do now, obviously, because we are in winter, is to look at a way that we can use Liverpool Without Walls through the winter. So you may have already seen Gino's on Castle Street, Dale Street have got a marquee outside that they're going to be using. And actually, when I say it's a marquee, it's more like a chalet when you go inside it. It's very well fitted out. That will provide more covers, and that's the key. It's providing opportunities for businesses to do what they do well, which is to provide great food, great service, but to expand their operation so that they can actually cover more and provide more service. So that will also happen to other restaurants on Castle Street. There's a simple process that you need to comply with, and that's all on our website on liverpoolbidcompany.com on the Without Walls element of that. Clearly, we need to provide technical information. As some of this is going to be semi-permanent, so it's going to be longer than 28, 56 days, it will also require a planning application and building control, but we're trying to smooth that process out so we can get businesses operating what they do, as I've said, providing that great food, great service, and maximizing the opportunities to give them the cash that those businesses need. Because we know that for 9 months, our businesses in the city centre have been suffering. Our footfall has reduced from the high levels it was at the beginning of the year, down almost, we're now running at about 69% of where we were last year in 2019. And to give you an indication of what that means in the city centre, footfall in the city centre it runs on a good year at about 1.2 million a week. At the moment, we're running at about 400,000 a week. We did go down to 120,000 back in March and April, but we did pick up, and we need to get that back because business needs, as Keith and Paul will say, business need cash, and they get the cash as a restaurant through providing covers, providing people sitting at tables, eating food. That's their business.
And the other big issue, Bill, as well as, you know, the lockdown for the hospitality sector has been the 10 p.m. curfew, which we know was took a big hit to the restaurant sector. You know, it meant that that last sitting that they would ordinarily benefit from, they didn't have the ability to provide that. We know from the people we work alongside, lots of cancellations when that curfew was imposed. You know, people of a certain age don't want to be eating at 6 o'clock at night, do they, to start the night out? It'll be all right for you, Bill, but it's not for most of them. So I'm reading today that there may be some movement on that, and I know you're involved in the national bid movement as well. Yep. So any news from your end of things on that particular issue? Well,
the BID Foundation, which is the organisation I chair, has been campaigning, like a lot of organisations, for the extension of that curfew, because it wasn't, as you and I remember when we used to go to the pub, Frank, that towels went up at 10 o'clock or 10:30 on a Friday night, then you had some drink up time. This wasn't drink up time, it was 10 o'clock, doors locked, out of the door. So as you've said, restaurants needed to stop serving at 9:30, 9:15. So it really was a major impact. And there was no scientific basis for it, was it? It was ludicrous, the scientific basis they used to fix that 10 p.m. curfew. So the fact that we're hearing, and perhaps Boris is going to be standing up in the House today, announcing that there'll be an hour's drink up time. Well, some of us probably need a bit longer than an hour to drink up, but just giving that flexibility allows a restaurant to have 2 sittings. Yeah. And you think of that allows them to double, if they can get the bookings, allows them to double the income coming into that business, allows them to pay more in keeping more staff employed, paying the fixed costs, because the fixed costs haven't gone away. So rent is a big issue for a lot of our businesses, and that hasn't gone away. And there's another rent quarter day coming up just in 3 weeks' time, when again we know that there will be businesses are severely impacted. So that 10 p.m. curfew extending by an hour is a significant boost to our restaurant sector in the city.
And then, of course, the other part of the big company in Liverpool, huge industry, of course, for the city, is retail. Massive hit for them, of course. And, you know, we've got some great retail outlets in Liverpool. We want to see them back on the feet as quickly as possible. I'm sure they're all gearing up for Christmas, and we're expecting the announcements, as you say, later today. But what are the sort of stories, Bill, that you hear in the experience of our retailers at this moment in time?
Well, as you've said, I mean, the retail in the city has been on an incredible journey. You know, we've always been a great retail city. Some of our key brands have been trading in our city for many, many years, decades, some of our key brands. Some of the new brands that have come into the city in recent years, we know that the Liverpool operation is the best and number one in the UK. So we've got great retail brands. Retail has been on that incredible journey, obviously with Liverpool One coming in 2005. But what we're hearing now is that we're hearing tales of, I mean, clearly impacted after 9 months, fixed costs, high fixed costs. So the only area where they can recover costs and reduce costs is, sadly, as Keith and Victoria were discussing, is it in redundancies. And I'm hearing that at a time when normally our retailers are employing more people during Christmas, they're actually looking at scaling back on numbers because the costs that they haven't got, they haven't been able to do the transactional business as a retailers that has enabled them to maintain the high level of costs. And we know that there are retailers who are looking, some of the retailers with heavy costs are looking at relocating out of the city. which again is a significant issue for us.
Yeah, and the final point on this, Bill, again, I don't know if you picked this up, but there was a suggestion that retail may be able to open the doors for longer hours. So you may even have, certainly in parts of London, they're talking about 24/7 opening. Is that being looked at in Liverpool?
We're certainly looking at extending opening hours. I know some of our major Church Street stores are looking at shopping up until 9 o'clock at night, and we'll look at extending that later. But obviously, you've got to balance that off against the costs of staff. Staff need, you can't just extend staff hours. You've got to bring more staff in to cover those hours. So it's a delicate balancing act. We need to see how people come back into the city. Now, the big problem is that we're coming back, we're opening up again on December the 3rd, and it seems that all non-essential retail will be able to open up. But we're opening up, we still have COVID. So they're opening up with COVID guidelines. COVID hasn't gone away. So you will still have queues outside. You'll still have reduced capacity in the retail units. So big issues around that that still need to manage, which will impact the business.
I have to say I was somewhat surprised when I heard that, because I think, although it was welcomed at the time, the Eat Out to Help Out initiative, I actually said I thought that it may come back to bite the government on the bum, and it did. And so that's not going to happen again. But now we're saying 24/7 opening hours in our retail outlets. I could just imagine that in January we'll be getting told that that's caused another spike. And we're heading towards lockdown 3. Talk about a government that doesn't learn the lessons. But Paul, glad you were able to finally join us, mate, and you sorted out your
listen, apologies, technology is not my thing, but I was getting mightily frustrated, I've got to tell you, but I'm in now.
Yeah, well, it's good that you've finally been able to join us. And as I said, you've had some very practical experience of what this pandemic has done to people, and I believe you've been working within a sector that's close to most of our hearts on this call, not to Victoria, I have to say, but football. You've been in football clubs that have been.
Yeah, we got appointed to Wigan Athletic at the start of July, and obviously there'd been no crowds since March. There was no income whatsoever at the club. They were running an 800 grand a month loss before COVID, and there was a change of ownership and new owners pulled out, and we got appointed with on the first of the month. The previous month's wages hadn't been paid. There'd been wage deferrals from the players and the senior staff from back to March, and as I said, the business was already losing 800 grand a month before COVID, so we inherited a fairly nightmarish position in terms of cash because there was none coming in, and we also weren't in a transfer window, so we couldn't actually sell any players.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of it wasn't easy.
Yeah, and I am aware that conversations are taking place at government level. Alison McGovern was on a call a few weeks ago saying that that she's trying to get the government to act in terms of rescue packages, particularly for the lower. And I think the Premier League have said they may contribute if we can come up with a formula that allows them to do so. Has there been any progress with that, Paul?
Yeah, I think they were all down in front of the select committee, weren't they, last week? So I think the government is basically saying, if you don't help bail out the lower clubs, we will force it on you. So I suspect what that means is they will bring levies in, whatever that levy might be on TV income or whatever, and the government will bring in legislation and distribute that money down. There definitely talks of monies coming in. I think there will be grants rather than loans. I don't know whether they'll be linked to future TV monies, but at some point that money will have to be repaid, whether it's at the higher level or whether it's at the lower level. Hopefully it won't be at the lower levels, because the amount of income that the lower clubs get, in particular like League One, League Two, it's pretty much all from day to day crowds on a Saturday. Yeah. And if you've got no crowd on a Saturday, you've got no beer sales, you've got no food sales, no hospitality, no programmes, no gate money, nothing. And the TV money at those levels isn't a lot.
And the other area I just wanted to touch upon, Paul, was Bill talking there about people facing another round of rent, and of course it's a fixed cost that is difficult for retailers and hospitality to meet at the moment. But then the other side of that coin is landlords. And, I feel as though landlords have been given a lot of stick over the last 6 months, unjustifiably, because as far as I'm aware, none of their lenders have said to them, don't worry about paying your loan. Don't worry about paying your mortgage. So you're a commercial landlord sat there, and, they're not all giants. These aren't all people who've got deep pockets. We've got lots of independent commercial landlords as well. And we've got landlords, of course, who act to provide accommodation for our students and for the community generally. I believe you've had some experience with that area as well.
Yeah, well, I think you'd be surprised if we haven't, to be honest. And your point is a valid one, that each time there's a problem, the government gives a bit of relief at some level, but really all it does is push the pressure somewhere else. So from the point of view of landlords, some of them, you rightly say, have got big loans that they can't repay. I think many of the banks are looking to extend those loans. So certainly on a lot of the buy-to-let landlords that I've seen, they've got situations where the bank's just basically back-end loading it and saying, well, you've got a 10-year mortgage, we'll make it an 11-year mortgage. Yeah. But that still means they've got to repay it at some point. We've looked at student stuff. Keith, I've looked at something not in the northwest, but where there's 60% occupancy, and I think there's 500 in the block. There's only 300 in occupation. You take that amount of income away, that actually the knock-on effect is exactly what you said. They can pay the day-to-day running costs, but they can't pay the landlord and the freeholder, which puts pressure on those people, because those people equally have got bank loans or they've got investors. And there is no easy answer to it, is there? Because somebody somewhere, it's like those balloons that you squeeze. If you keep squeezing, it comes out somewhere else. Yeah. And each point there's sympathy. The working man gets sympathy, obviously. He's got his family to feed. And as it goes up the line, there seems to be less sympathy with the bigger organisations. But there is no answer. The government isn't going to bail them out. No. And some of the landlords have been quite reasonable. I've seen restaurants where the landlords who are more local people have said, look, we're all in it together. We will mothball it. You can start paying rent again when things pick up. We've proposed CVAs for companies on a similar vein. But equally, I had a situation in London where I had it was a techie sort of flexible property, which we had about 800 people in. And these were all innovative people, maybe working in one to five groups, with software products, with all sorts of innovative products. And they just rent a room, or they rent a boardroom, or they rent something for a month, or they can. It's very, very flexible. And then there was rent being paid to a landlord based in New York, and we went back and said, look, can we have a sort of holiday until the 1st of January, and then we'll step it back up when people start returning, because the individual businesses, they couldn't afford the rent. The government told them they couldn't come into the building. And there's no point, you can't get blood out of a stone. A guy who's come out of university and set up his own business, if he can't do his job, he can't earn any money, he can't pay his rent. And that landlord basically gave us two fingers and said they thought it was a trial, which we went back with formal papers to say, if you don't agree, it will just have to go into administration. But there is a plan here where you will get back within maybe 18 months back to the same level of rent if we pull out in the back end of next year. And they just said no. So it ended up in administration, which to me was just a ludicrous answer, because this thing had been going 10 years. The pioneers of it had strongly believed in local technology companies and supported them. And it just seemed an utter waste to have everybody thrown on the scrap heap.
Good luck to them to fill that space anytime soon.
And they won't fill it. And they'll be liable. The silly thing is, which I did point out at the time, is when I flick it into liquidation, which I will do when I've sorted out the administration side, the first thing I'll be doing is disclaiming that lease. And that means the landlord will be responsible for the rates, which we pointed out to them, and they just didn't. They honestly just thought the playing hardball was going to get somebody somewhere writing a check out, and there was no money, because 800 people went down to, I think, less than 20. So the rent, the rent's coming down to 5%. The rent we were collecting was coming down to 5% of what they had been collecting.
Incredible. Right, I think Heather's put in the chat room, if you've got any questions for the panel, please enter them into the chat. Now, for obvious reasons, somebody sent me a message privately. They haven't asked me where I got my suit from. They're asking me about redundancy payments and redundancy processes. And so, let me just get this right. Yeah, I don't want to give anything. You can understand why this is confidential. So, Victoria, obviously you're the person to pick this up on. Has any increased flexibility been given to employers as far as redundancy is concerned, or are the existing processes, the previous processes, still in place? I think they're talking about, consultation, the sort of things that you've always had to do if you're making people redundant. They still part of employment law, or is flexibility being brought in now because of this unique situation we find ourselves?
It's a really good question. Absolutely not. It's very much still in play, and there's been a real spike in employment tribunal claims. I predicted this at the beginning. It's only going to get worse because people are trying to use the current situation as an excuse not to, or maybe like what I said before, the fact that they're just not thinking straight. They just need to get rid of these staff quickly to survive. It will bite you on the bum. You will end up in an employment tribunal. So my advice is absolutely make sure that you do have that meaningful consultation. You do make sure that you have those meetings, and you have to have them online. If you're not meeting, if you haven't got the facility to meet face to face at the moment, then you need to do it online. And one of the things that we've done is obviously advise people to just bear that in mind as well. And it logistically can take a little bit longer sometimes to try and get people in the room. It depends on, without sort of having to divulge who it is, it'll depend on how many redundancies they're making as well. If they are over 20 employees that are being made redundant, you do need to follow the collective arrangements. I've got some information happy to share. I can pass to you, Frank, that we've wrote around this, which we can share obviously to downtown members, but really would say make sure, if nothing else, that you follow that process. And just bear in mind what I said earlier as well, if you are making redundancies after the 1st of December, you're going to have to top up that notice pay yourself rather than rely on furlough. Okay,
so same person asking another question privately as well. You could have put this one in the chat room. I think I know the answer to this, but I'll leave it to the expert. So the furlough bonus that we were promised in January, so this was where you furloughed staff, you keep them up until January, and I think it was £1,000 per employee. Rumours suggest that that's been scrapped. I think it's more than a rumour. I think he has scrapped that, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's my understanding of that. Yeah. But to be honest, Frank, you told me that first.
Did I tell you that? You said, there you go.
Yeah, you're definitely the expert there.
People say I'm not a detailed sort of guy. Just shows you. No, I think, again, let's put a bit of balance into that discussion as well. I know some businesses will be really disappointed at that news, but of course, on the back of that, he did announce that he was going to extend furlough to 80% right through till March. So I suppose you pays your money and takes your choice with that. And I think on balance, I'd probably say that the extended furloughs help businesses more. So I wouldn't be too harsh on the Chancellor there. But
Frank, he did backdate as well, the furlough. So for if anyone had made redundancies, because as you know, I was in uproar when it was announced, because my team has worked with lots of clients before then to make redundancies because they thought furlough was about to end, but they did backdate it. So if you'd made a redundancy from the 23rd of September, you could actually re-employ that person and put them on furlough. So, you know, there are those situations as well. I'd rather that than get a bonus for retaining staff, to be honest.
Frank, can I just add on that as well, that if there are company directors who are considering formal insolvency processes anytime soon, before they start making people redundant, you know, that they speak to people like ourselves so that we can discuss with them the implications of things like 2P for the staff, and, you know, making the right people redundant and following the correct process in conjunction with somebody like Victoria.
Yeah, and there's another. Nobody wants to ask questions publicly today. This is one for you, actually, Keith or Paul. Either you can take this. If the business is in trouble and they wish to continue to trade through Christmas, because obviously Christmas for these guys is usually quite good, will they find themselves in difficulty then if come the new year? The gist of this is, look, we might get through December and we might have a boom in December and be able to continue in the new year. But if we can't, if it's not as good through December, does that impact us at all in terms of moving forward?
So want me to pick that one up, Keith?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think the fundamentals with this are trading whilst you're insolvent isn't a problem as long as you're making the position better or not worse. So, and the Companies Act gives all directors a get out if they act honestly and reasonably. So if you think that your business is going to pull through and have a good Christmas and that's going to make everyone's position better, then as long as that's not a reckless sort of thought, then generally, you know, people would look at that in a positive light. If your business is insolvent, what you need to be careful of is that you don't make anybody's position significantly better or significantly worse. So if you're going out and taking credit, then you need to make sure that the person you're taking credit from is getting a payment, so that you can't have somebody, you can't go out and order £100,000 worth of stuff to sell it, and then not pay that guy his 100,000. I think if you remember back to when HMV went under, we'd all bought our kids vouchers for HMV to buy records and CDs with, and they did a bit of a rescue plan before that they thought was going to work. It didn't work. It all collapsed, and they'd taken all this money in. And I had a conversation with the administrators at the time to say, I don't think what you've done is right. You've taken money off the public. The banks have got 50 million better off, but actually the public are, I think it's 3 million worse off. That the overall plan is 47 million up, which is great, but you can't leave the public 3 million out of pocket. And they agreed with that, and they honoured all those vouchers. So there are ways of dealing with things. I would say that you're not going to get yourself in trouble if you're making it better. You're not going to get yourself in trouble if you're making it no worse. And if you're having a go in the current times and you think you've got a good way of getting out the other side, that's what the government's encouraging. That's why they're giving people bounce back loans and civils. But obviously, if there is no chance, then you need to really be taking advice.
Thanks, Paul. Very helpful and a much more complex answer than I'd anticipated.
Sorry.
You see, that's why you go to experts, because I'd have just said, yeah, crack on. But it's more.
Yeah, well, that's what I said, but I said it in a more technical way, mate.
Yeah. Listen, that's why we get professionals on these calls, so we get the right answers, not my daft advice. Bill, final question from me to you. Christmas lights, are we having any this year in Liverpool?
Yes, we are. Most of them are already on. But the favourite, I mean, obviously there are some new modern light trees that people have, obviously not as bad as Metal Mickey, if you remember that one, but the Church Street Christmas tree is the real tree is in place, and the lights are being switched on this week. So there are lights throughout the city. Obviously they're reduced this year because resources aren't where they are, but we're hoping that when people do come into the town from next Wednesday, that they will see the town with the lights in place, looking festive, and come and enjoy Liverpool safely.
Great. Thanks, Bill. Listen, thanks for all your contributions. Before we go, just let people know how they can contact your respective organisations if they want to have a conversation with you directly. Keith?
Yeah, obviously on the website, so that has all of the information. But from an email, obviously my name, keith.tully@btguk.com. That's the easiest way to do it. But, you know, anyone who hasn't got a pen handy, to just go online at Begbies Traynor, and you can search individual partners with individual offices, so you can get hold of Paul or myself that way.
Okay. Victoria?
So our website is www.highperformanceconsultancy.com. I did mention earlier as well, we do have a people hub. It's free, it's a webinar, and we have a closed LinkedIn group as well. And the idea is just to help as many businesses as we can right now. So HR professionals, business owners, anybody that's got people sort of responsibility, feel free to join. And that's the people hub on LinkedIn. So more than welcome to attend.
Okay. And Bill, how do people get in touch with the bid?
They can look at our website, which is liverpoolbidcompany.com, or social media. Or if they want to contact me directly, it's bill.addy@liverpoolbidcompany.com, or my own personal Twitter account, which has been referenced already this morning at Addy Consultancy.
Fantastic. Listen, guys, it's been great to get your thoughts and some really good tips there for people listening in. We will circulate the details of all those who registered to our panelists today, so they may be in touch directly, and then you can engage with them. But equally, if there's something that perhaps you wanted to ask, haven't had time to, and you want to get something through to these guys quickly, then please don't hesitate to get in touch with Downtown in Business, and we'll make sure any queries are answered. Thanks again, guys. Great to see you.
All.
Yes, thank you.
Catch you all again soon. Cheers.
Bye now.
Bye.